Hi, this is the Drupal usability meeting for October 2nd, 2018. And we have one topic from Travis.
Great, thank you. I have been asked to share about an issue. I'll share my screen here. You see that okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, both.
Okay, great.
Just for the record, can you read the issue number?
Absolutely. The issue number is 2935790. Configuration change, data loss prevention functionality, inconsistent and restrictive. This is an issue that I filed a little while back after noticing that the way that Core tries to prevent data loss, both via the UI and via APIs, is inconsistent and can lead to surprising results or the inability to perform certain actions at all. So I took the several actions and just recorded what happens when you attempt to perform them via the UI and via Drush. To give an example, if you try to delete a content type that has existing nodes, then Drupal just refuses to do it. And it gives you this message. I use the example content type. So example is used by one piece of content on your site. You cannot remove it until you've removed all of the example content. But if you do the same thing with a vocabulary that has existing terms, it allows you to do it. It just warns that it's going to delete all the terms itself. If you try to delete a field that has data in it, Drupal will allow you and delete the data, but it won't mention that that's going to happen. Whereas we've kind of got one of everything. If you try to change configuration of a field with data in it, then Drupal will refuse to do it altogether. And it will not, it will give you a notice that it refuses, but it won't offer to or give you the ability to delete the data so that you can move forward with it. So having encountered this numerous times in a delivery context in professional services at Acquia, I can tell you that one of the effects of this on a delivery team is that you have confused developers, particularly if they're not very senior, and a lot of writing update hooks and forgetting which scenario is which. So the impetus of the issue here is to advocate for a consistent approach, first of all, and second of all, to ensure that everything is possible, at least with the acceptance of a warning. And what I mean by that is if you're working via the UI, it's great. For example, I like the way that vocabulary does it. Like if you do this, you're going to lose this data, but click OK to continue. I like that approach because it warns you, but it's still possible to get by because obviously the whole import here is that we want to prevent people from blowing their toes off. But especially when you're in an enterprise delivery context, you want the ability to do some of these things. So to have that ability both via the UI and especially for mature development teams to be able to do that via config import with Drush or some other CLI mechanism is important from my perspective. So short of reading the whole issue, I think that is how I would introduce it. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I mean, it's pretty matter of fact that we have to come up with a cleaner way to delete things. And I mean, I almost want to read through the comments because we need an interface. We need that config form. There's a confirmation form, I think it's called, that just says what's the message and what's the delete button and what's the redirect if they cancel. Mm-hmm. And I feel like all the things you described could be solved if there was like a shared interface. It's like, is this, because there's another ticket floating around to have like a double confirmation, not just an okay, you know, like that enter, type in the word delete to make sure you know that this is completely destructive behavior that's going to wipe out data, which I'm always for. If we're wiping out people's data, we almost want a double confirmation.
Yeah.
Where it's not just clicking buttons, because that one we all know people get burned on. I have a check in web form. I put a checkbox that's required so that it requires that extra manual step. Because the problem with that return button is if you hit enter, it'll submit it. It'll click it through for you if there's no inputs on the form.
Right.
So maybe the issue you're thinking of is 2773205. That's come up with a design for highly destructive operations in confirm forms.
Yeah, I mean, everything described to you is highly destructive. I mean,
I don't know if this is an option, but I would also recommend that there be a global override flag to block those types of destructive things because of the complexities in the permission sets that we give out. A lot of times people are given more rights than you necessarily want, and we don't have the granularity right now in core. And it would mean that a site builder who has a lot of content editors may have to give them access to a taxonomy, for instance, and not want to give them delete capabilities. So some way of managing that would still make sense.
So this is my first attendance to one of these meetings. Now that I've proposed the issue, am I supposed to try to shepherd the conversation at all, or do I sit back and let you guys discuss?
I don't know that we have a formal like structure for that. I think people tend to just kind of talk, and at some point it feels like we're done talking, and then we kind of naturally move into like solutioneering and trying to figure out. I mean, we kind of have already done that based on Jacob's comments and stuff. So you feel, Jacob, like this would benefit from a standard interface with a standard UI that allows that enforces a consistent set of behaviors throughout all of these kind of potentially destructive operations. Although Thomas then was advocating for like a thou shalt not delete no matter what option, which then kind of gets us back heading in the same direction of inconsistency between these things. So I don't know.
I'm actually, I was advocating for simply a global flag that allowed you to choose which mode. So you would consistently everywhere either A, allow people to delete, or if someone decided for whatever reason they didn't want that to be the default behavior, they could choose one of the other default behaviors. But I would advocate for consistency.
So treating it like the user deletion stuff. Right now we have I forget all the options, but you know, it's like when a user account is deleted, what do you want to have happen to the content? Does the content also get deleted? Does it get reassigned to anonymous? Does it stay there with their name and it just mentions that they're no longer there or whatever, you know, like, and then you choose that option and then that option gets applied consistently throughout the site. So you're advocating for an option kind of like that, where it's like, how do you want to deal with destructive content?
Yes.
And then you'd have the option of don't ever allow deleting it no matter what, or the option of allow deleting it with a warning, or I don't know what the other options would be, but like that kind of thing. But then it would take effect consistently across the entire site. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
I feel like that, just to be like my feeling about that, like how people delete content and how config's overwritten and config protection is being handled in contrib. Like, so I'm hesitant to be, I think core should have APIs available and respect those APIs so that in contrib, you know, people can adjust these spaces. Because one thing about like deleting something, like I think entity delete access permission does propagate properly. So if someone goes into hook entity access operation, like I think it's like an access check, and you look at the delete operation, you write a custom module and say, don't let anyone delete anything, that should turn off all delete configuration forms across the site. Like literally, if Drupal's APIs were correct, in some cases they are, those delete forms are not linked to anymore. They're just like taken off the site in the contrib space. Providing a UI to do that, I feel like I'm hesitant. I would rather see core focus on the APIs first, or the first step is the APIs.
Yeah, I agree. A consistent API that everything can use is definitely step 0 in the process. But I think in order to achieve the outcome we want, which is a consistent behavior of all of these different things across entity types and across, like the end user doesn't know or care whether something's a config entity or whether something's a content entity or whether something is a whatever. Like they have no idea. They just get frustrated because over here I pressed delete and it warned me first before I deleted everything, and over here it did not, and now my shit is gone and I'm pissed, So, yeah, it's a tricky problem.
And can we just right now what we have is this kind of awkward form called I think it's like the confirm form. It's not a delete form. It's a confirm that you want to do something, and it's a very lightweight interface. It's like message, 3 things. The title, the description, the button label, and if you cancel. And good part is we could extend that and create like a delete confirmation form that really gets into these nuances. Or we make it destructive confirmation, I don't know, advanced confirmation, and capture all these possibilities. And then we tell developers they got to use them.
Right. So that's the tricky thing is we have to preserve BC. So obviously the best we could do here is create a new API that's opt-in and convert all of core to use it, and then recommend that contrib use it. But that would be about the best we could do for Drupal 8 anyway. But I guess, Jacob, you've run into this in the field. Like, do you feel like if we were to provide such an interface and ideally get all of the core entities and config system and whatever to use it, that would be a good step in the right direction? And do you have a recommendation on like whether Thomas's idea of choosing a global behavior for this makes sense, or whether you would prefer, like, there's one that makes sense for 80% of sites, we should use that one? Or do you have any thoughts on the implementation?
I think if we focus on a new, like a new form, new interface that people can use, we can get a little more advanced. I mean, one thing, I do dialogues for delete, which just makes way more sense than having people go to a page. So like if you're on a field API and you say you want to delete a field, it's a better UX to open a dialogue saying you're about to delete the field here. This, if you think of every application we ever go to where we delete something, it generally opens a dialogue that's a confirmation with a destroy. Like, I don't know, let's just call it like the double confirmation. Everyone does that now.
Yeah, it's kind of a pattern and it's really useful.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't leave the page, and that's the most important thing. You don't lose context. Yeah. So you are staying on the same page.
You're seeing what you're about to kill. You're seeing what you're about to delete. And
exactly.
One thing, that approach, even I'm using in web form, is not like a major Ajax-y thing, because it's just a modal dialogue, and when they actually hit delete, it goes to the server and refreshes the page without the information. So it's not asking a lot for people to, it's not asking a lot for people to implement that. And it lines up with improving Drupal's admin user experience. Yeah, those are my thoughts. I think we can get 80%. I think we can get 90%. I can't think of use cases that would throw me off here. It's like you're telling them what they're deleting. You want them to, the terminology I use, it's like you want to tell them what sub-elements they're deleting. So if they're deleting a content type, you want to list out all the fields they're going to delete. So you need an API to kind of say what other references. It would be nice if our API had levels of destruction, like red if it, like we had an interface that decided this is highly destructive, not destructive, mildly destructive, or not a big deal. That would address all. Even in web form, I have the same problem. I have certain fields. If someone deletes an element with data, I show them a different message if it doesn't have data.
But maybe then we are talking about the message, but the UI pattern that we will follow will be anyway a model or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and just maybe the color of the button's different, or the message is framed
Yeah.
in the colors that we use: red, red, yellow, blue for just basic info. Which that helps if there's icons in color. It tells people what's going on, because red really makes them stop and read it.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where should we go with that, because I'm not really sure how many colors we should put inside that, but yeah, probably colors, and also the message that you're giving, and also of course the action button, the primary button.
Yeah.
There.
And I just wanted to say that I can confirm all 4 use cases that Travis mentioned. As a site builder, I run into them repeatedly, and taxonomy is the one that is both the easiest and most frustrating because of how the permissions ended up working as I assigned them to people, which is where my interest was. Because if we're going to be allowing things more globally to behave the same, we're saying people can delete a particular field, for instance. We want to make certain that people have the right permission accesses to each of those use cases. And I don't know if we have to review that separately or not.
It's something worth noting in the ticket. It's not done right. My point would be, like, you have a delete form and it has access checks, but the link to the delete form doesn't always go through the proper access checks. So that's, like, if you want to have granular control, it's something worth noting so that we check it.
Cool. Okay.
And to Thomas's earlier point about having some kind of global setting, that could be addressed without adding a new concept to core with permissions, so that in addition to, or maybe as a subset of administer whatever, you could have perform destructive operations on. And then so suppose you had a permission perform destructive operations on taxonomy, and then someone tries to delete a vocabulary that has terms in it. If you have the permission perform destructive operations on taxonomy, then it would prompt you and say, this has terms, do you want to destroy them and move on, or cancel? If you don't have that permission, it just says, this has content in it, you can't delete it.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, it sounds perfect. I mean, that would be, you can't delete it, contact an administrator.
Right.
That is lots of use cases that are really good.
And that exactly answers the problem I've had, where I have people being given access to taxonomies who I don't want deleting taxonomies and stuff, but I do want them to be able to delete individual terms.
So is what we're kind of implicitly doing here, taking, kind of analyzing the 4 different ways that core does it right now, and basically designing what we think should be the normal pattern that everyone observes, such that we should document that on the ticket when we're done and make that kind of the first step to decide and get consensus on that optimal design?
Yeah, I mean, the other part, I mean, taxonomy might be the right place to start, which just helps people understand, like, you pick one system in core and you say, okay, we have lots of different deletes, which we do in taxonomy. You have the full taxonomy, a term with nodes. That kind of covers the 3 different levels of issues.
Yeah, actually, something that will be super useful will be, for example, pasting some URLs there, so people can actually go direct to the form we're talking about, and also pasting screenshots on the issue will help a lot people to understand where or what are we talking about. If there are screenshots we have to show right now, but I think so. At least some other confirmation pages where we have a similar pattern or something like that. So I would say steps to reproduce this. I mean, we have use cases here, but we don't have steps to quickly reproduce these things.
I'm taking some notes here that I'm planning to turn into a comment. Let me throw it in a Google Doc real quick, and we can take a look.
So the idea here will be to create something in general, so like a pattern to apply on all the places where we will like that. Is this issue for that, or just in a specific situation?
Yeah, I think the issue Travis brought up has a bunch of different, at least places where this comes up in the issue summary. Hold up 1 second.
I mean, for example, the last one that you shared, that will be like the meta issue, right? And the other is on a specific case. That is configuration change. Or am I understanding it properly?
Let me look again.
By the way, here's a link in chat to the original issue I brought up.
Either me or Drupal.org is extremely slow right now.
T.O.
Those issues. But anyway, here's a place I'm trying to figure out the comments that we want to put that kind of like encapsulates the discussion so far. So if anyone wants to, feel free to correct anything in there. I can't get to those issues, Christina, but yeah, I think you're right that the first one, the one that Travis brought to the meeting, the 2935790, I seem to remember that as being like a meta issue talking about the general problem, and it lists several instances where this comes up and in ways in which it's inconsistent.
So
and then
is this one the general one? Come up with a design.
I think that's the general one.
Yeah, since folks are having a hard time
the design.
I'm screen sharing it here again so you can see it.
Yay, thanks. It did finally come up for me. Okay, so I'm sorry, I mixed that up. So 2935790, that documents all the different ways that this is weird. And then 2773205, that's the one that is like, hey, let's make a spec for how we want this to work. It looks like there's a spec from comment 12 10 months ago. So I was like, I swear we've talked about this before, but I can't remember what. So yeah, the 2773205, that does have some comments from Masipia. And number 12 and 14 that have some screenshots in them and that have been vetted by at least Yoroi, it looks like.
Yeah, it looks like Roy actually proposed like a button, a GIF. He shared a GIF where the submit button actually became the cancel, and some of the right above Yeah, this GIF. Nope. Up. Yeah, Roy's GIF there on comment 15. If you open the GIF, he's just showing that, and some of the feedbacks say that it wasn't appropriate because people could click 2 times on the same button or something like that.
Yeah, if that's a concern, that seems like a good application of the what did you call it? Double confirm, I think, where you have to type in a string, kind of like when you try to delete a GitHub repository. It says, you know, danger zone, type in the name of the repository to confirm you want to actually delete it.
I'm not really sure we should make that the standard pattern. I mean, I think a model is more appropriate, like a standard pattern. It doesn't mean that in some situations maybe we can't rely on other patterns, but by default, I don't think that's a really standard way of solving it. I mean, I don't see a site builder writing every time he or she wants to delete a field. Are you sure you want to delete the field? Wait, type this thing here. I mean,
Yeah, no, that's for. I mean that's used. The pattern I've seen, Pantheon uses it when you're deleting a website. I think Acquia might even use, like on hosting, like when you're deleting a website, when you're purging mass amounts of data, that the text field is. And by the way, if we get these tiers thought out, it starts to make sense. The highly destructive tier could have the word confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
Core should include that already because people ask for that all the time. Like they want a way to like confirm a value of a field. Oh, we have support for that, by the way. We have a pattern validation, so we can actually get that to work. Like we don't have to write any new APIs. That's just building a form that says enter in this label, and Core supports that validation. Okay. Just a hard-coded pattern.
Right, so that could be implemented with a base form class.
But you mean if you, for example, want to delete a node, you should actually
Wouldn't do
have
it
to
for a
type?
node. No, we would agree for a node. I mean,
Okay.
you know, they like to have two. Highly destructive is a big problem in Core because there's a couple of the deleting of an entire taxonomy is once that happens, there's no going back. You've lost so much data. But for a node, the point, yeah, a double click, or maybe, you know, we'd agree that nodes, it's kind of cool, this idea if we made it alterable, and it was like, for nodes, we say we don't require any double confirmation, or actually they have to just go to a confirmation screen, hit delete, and that's it.
Oof.
Or they'd have to click twice. I mean, that's...
I think a model here, like, are you sure? Yes, or so, I don't know, something like that. At least I'm not really sure what happened right now. Really far away from content authoring.
Yeah, but Core right now does that. If you're on a node and you hit the delete button in the bottom right-hand corner, it doesn't delete the node. It goes to a screen that says, are you sure you want to delete this node?
Okay, yeah. Then
like that's the pattern. We already have that.
And something that will make it faster and easier will be just have a model or a pop-up or something like that that says, are you sure? Yes. And that's all. I mean, I still think some kind of confirmation should be there.
Off the top of my head, all of Core does that. Every single delete operation goes to that confirmation. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything that bypasses that.
In some instances, though, when they go to that page, it will list what's being deleted, and sometimes it does not list what's being deleted.
Yes.
That's what I recall.
Yeah, and config entities, they seem to be listing the configuration file. I'm laughing because it doesn't help anyone, but they list the configuration files that are about to be deleted. So only a developer that knows how config works can appreciate what they're looking at.
So then maybe we should try to come up with the situations wherein we need a higher level, and then decide for the general one.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, I can take some lead on doing the inventory. I'm willing to step up. I mean, like, I'm slammed with other things, but I'm more than willing to sit down with core, and because I think the pattern is we go through all the entities, so we're like node users terms. Then we go through plugins and see how those are deleted. Off the top of my head, like image style would be one of those. And then we go into the weird one, which would be like views and cores. It has interesting patterns for deleting things.
I kind of recall a previous meeting where we actually discussed the text appearing there. I mean, I think it was with Anja. I don't remember anyone else, but I think some kind of related issue must be around there. I don't know. Maybe I'm just confusing issues.
In doing, I'm sorry. In doing an inventory, do we also want to reach out to the folks working on media? Because this sounds like a pattern that would be happening a lot with the media work.
Yeah, it came up in media because they're using dialogues a little bit more. They have this problem. Yeah. Just to walk through, the media browser opens in a dialogue, and in the media browser, you're going to be able to delete things. That's a new pattern because you're in a dialogue and you're going to delete something.
So dialogue over a dialogue over a dialogue.
Yeah, or yeah, but views has that use case sometimes. So that I think a lot of them would be very similar. We'd find patterns where we'd be like, here's a simple delete, and then here's all the paths that you could go to in core for a basic delete, which, I think off the top of my head, like node users and terms follow the same pattern. It's other things that get. So what ticket would we want this information on? Because all I see it as is here's a bunch of small screenshots, thumbnails that open up to larger ones, the path to these delete screens. I don't think I'm going to go where there's multiple ways to get to the delete screen, so the goal is just the delete screen. What ticket would make the most sense to append this information to?
I would say the one that we were seeing, just the one ended with 05.
The 205.
Come up with the design.
Okay.
I would say that's a general one, right? The other
that's
is
the one
more
for highly destructive operations.
Oh, okay.
And I guess I sometimes wonder what is a rational way to describe highly destructive? Because if you build a site with paragraphs and you have a node with a bunch of paragraph references on it, and you delete the node, I think all those paragraph entities are deleted as well. And is that fundamentally different from removing all of the taxonomy terms associated with the vocabulary?
Well, paragraphs is kind of redefining how individual nodes works by making one node multi-nodal in essence, I guess. Whereas all the use cases we're discussing here are about taking a higher level entity and deleting all of the things associated with that entity, which could impact, in theory, all nodes. So it just sounds like highly destructive is things that are more bulk or mass versus an operation that would impact a single piece of content.
Yeah, with the paragraphs example, you have a single piece of content that's simply composite content. So if you're asking to delete that content, presumably getting rid of the paragraphs is essential in your mind to the task at hand. Whereas if you're changing an architectural detail like a vocabulary, then the cascade effect or the second order effect of deleting content that's not composite contained within it makes that a substantially different task. One could easily overlook the possibility of that second order consequence.
I'm not sure I see the difference. Like node, vocabulary, paragraph, taxonomy term.
Because behaviorally, when you're dealing with content creators, they're going to expect that when they create a single, in parentheses, page or piece of content, that all of its associated parts would be deleted when they choose to delete a page or that piece of content. Whereas a vocabulary is generally across multiple content generators. It's something that doesn't, in all the instances I've dealt with it, it's not something about a single piece of content. Each term is its own piece of content and can have its own subsequent fields.
Yeah, really one of those is a content editor task and the other is an architectural task. So it's the architectural task that, yeah.
I mean, if we did this right and we made a good API, because I know I work with people who do massive node relationships, and they would love when they go to delete a node, it showed all the relationships to that node. Like, so that it could show what's really being broken. Like, these other nodes depend on this node and have entity references to it. That's not something core would solve, but if we made it easy for contrib to do that, it would be a nice feature.
Right? If we provide the API, then someone could implement that in the contrib module.
Yeah, because there's contrib modules that track relationships, but I don't think those those modules that are kind of figuring out what the relationships are, they don't have an easy way to go into that delete form and be like, okay, it's consistent. I just need to alter this one property, and boom, it's going to render out all these relationships. I'll give you a good example. I think the custom blocks. I bet you when you delete a custom block, it doesn't say all the instances in your site it's going to go take it off of. And that's hard to know.
Boy, that and deleting media entities. I had a lot of customers that would be really happy if that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, because right now the rule of media entities and files, the rule is don't delete them. Because you just don't know.
Right.
Customers, yeah.
But do you really think that actually having a different pattern will solve it instead of having a better copy? I mean, saying them, if you do that, then the consequences will be these ones. I mean, having a pop-up or a modal that says, are you sure? I mean, are you sure that it will actually be better having to type something or something like that? I mean, I'm talking about these site building options, not the structural ones. I mean, I'm talking more where to place that limit. What's a highly destructive operation?
I think it's, and weirdly, like when we do this inventory and I walk through it, we're going to see where that's kind of been established. It's like kind of funny would be right now, the way to see it is the amount of text. Whoever arbitrarily made the decision on that delete form page, what's the amount of text they put in? If they just said you're about to delete X, are you sure? Generally, that's not a highly destructive behavior. As soon as they've started manipulating that text, it hints that it's a destructive behavior. I think nodes are really simple at this point. They just say you're deleting the node.
Okay, so next steps here should be what?
I'll do the inventory and try to figure out the patterns, because it's funny, even as I just went to the node delete and I was like, gosh darn it, there's a whole other pattern in here that the deletion of a node is available as a local task, aka tab in the menu. You know, like nodes have view, edit, delete. as a tab. But then if you go to the node edit form, there's a delete link at the bottom. So there's like two ways to get to this one place.
Well, that's actually touching on an issue. I don't even know if it's still active that we submitted a couple of years ago, and that's there's some behavior problems with how nodes have those terms across the top, and I thought that was being partially fixed by something that Lightning was working on, an editorial dashboard or something like that that was being committed, at least to Lightning. But the issue was some of those things don't go to true tabs, and some of those are like because they're operational, they're verbs, and some of those things are nouns and they're actual tabs. So the difference between delete and revisions is a list of things. It's not an action, whereas delete is an actual action that you're taking. And that really confused a lot of our content generators who are actually Drupalists, which was really kind of funny.
Okay, yeah, it's like I'll try to note those. I feel like the node one is an edge case. I don't recall. I'll look.
Is the multiplicity of different places that you can perform the action of concern to you? Because even without limiting to the node example, but using it as an illustration, you've also got bulk operations views on the content listing and any other custom view that uses bulk operations, and the links in the admin view as opposed to the bulk operations checkboxes. The same thing is true of media items, that you can get to those delete operations. In the case of nodes, a minimum of 4 different ways.
Yeah, 4 was the number I was coming up with. It sounds bulk, the operations menu, the next to the when you're on an edit form, and then the tab. And I can't think of any other ones. Oh, you could do it through books, I think. I think books has an operations menu where it has a delete drop down, which is a destructive. It's a UX issue that might have been fixed finally, but it's like you can delete a page from a book or delete the node entirely, and that throws people off.
Can't you also add in the button via a view? I seem to recall that you could add a delete button via views.
Yeah, dedicated delete link here. We tend not to use that in core, I think. Can't think, yeah, because we always have operations. It's like view, edit, delete are the 3 operations that seem standardized. So they usually go hand in hand. And that operations menu would, if someone turned off view and edit, there would be a single delete button, but that's possible. I've actually done it accidentally, but it's rare that there's just the word delete. And we have the, it's funny, we have the uninstall modules confirmation, which is a similar issue. Because that's a destructive behavior. All right, I'll have a good time finding all these things. Is there anything else we want to add to this? Or, I mean, I feel like if I did this research in the next week, we could talk about it again and try to figure out the next action.
I think it's the next action to at least have the whole view of this instead of taking a decision only on 1 or 2 examples.
Yeah, I think if I can get a dozen and try to find the patterns, that'll get us a starting point. Because I mean, and I don't. It would be good for me to do it because there's a couple of spaces I want to know what's really going on. Like the one, like interesting ones we haven't talked about is like deleting a theme or unsetting it. What happens? Oh, you can't uninstall a theme.
You can't at all?
Let me see. Well, no, I have
Yeah,
two on.
there's an issue for that as well. There's an issue for that too, yeah.
Oh, wait, you can uninstall. Okay, you can uninstall if you have an extra theme with no confirmation. Okay, yeah. Oh, Gabor, you're getting into there's a whole other. Got it. Okay.
Thank you, man. That's really nice of you to take that on. So, shall we got about 10 minutes left in this meeting, but it sounds like we've kind of arrived at, yep, huge problem. B, fixing it would be really good. C, a few ideas on how we could fix it. And D, the next step is kind of ferreting out all the places it is going to be a problem. Then to make sure that whatever solution we come up with will work for the various use cases. So it looks like a spreadsheet or something, but Jacob, you're planning to kind of canvas all of core and come up with these use cases for highly destructive operations or moderately destructive operations, and then like we'll revisit this next week with that list in mind, hopefully, and then
yeah, just
and then go from
screenshots.
there.
Yeah, screenshot the entity or area, a screenshot, a path, and that's it. And then we'll decide how to categorize them. I'm not, because if I start categorizing, I think we're going down a rabbit hole until.
No, that's perfect. Actually, that's even better.
Yeah,
Well,
great.
I was just experimenting. On your list of ways to delete a node, did you consider the contextual link from front end, or is that number 5?
That's, yeah. Oh, God.
I think that's number 5.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get a big overview.
Oh, API requests.
Yeah,
Do we
yeah.
want to consider API requests?
I avoided that because I was like, I don't think so. I think if an API, APIs are controlled. They're trusted users that have vetted permissions. I mean, I can't. It seems a little, like our operations and access controls and the access results have messages. Like that should be handling that scenario. I mean, or it's a separate ticket.
Well, I think we have the admin UI, and then we have command line utilities like Drush, and we have REST API. And I think all of them should have some options, some way of dealing with this. We have to consider all 3 of them when making big solutions.
My gut with Drush is it's more standardized because they're limited to what they can do. I think they have a standard API for delete. I'd have to check it. Yeah, it's like a confirmation. And then it goes through. We could look at it.
Yeah, I wasn't intending to open a can of worms there, just to clarify the intended scope of what's being documented.
It's still a good point with Drush is if we had a standard UX that Drush can pull from, then they could get the messaging from core and not have to rewrite. I'm sure all the messages you see when you go delete config entities is hard coded in Drush. Like those strings. Like you're about to delete this config entity. Do you want to confirm? It has to be. They've had to come up with their own language.
All right, I'm sensing a lull. Can folks take a look at this doc? I'm going to paste this as a comment. Anybody feel like there's stuff in here that we did not capture? So people can't read that. It's Travis Carden brought this to the UX meeting today. What we discussed was the idea of providing a destructive confirm interface or similar that encapsulates the following behavior. 1, existing settings from whatever the existing confirm interface is. Because it's kind of a superset of that. 2, displays a list of all sub-elements that will also be deleted. 3 provides an access check that must be passed in order to delete the sub-items. This is tied to a permission or similar. Or whatever number I'm on, the confirm form in a modal dialog instead of a separate page. And then we also talked about the ability to give like different tiers of destruction, like highly or moderately destructive. Ideally, we can convert everything in core to this new API/UI, and make it available and encourage for contrib authors as well. And we could deprecate the existing one for removal in Drupal 9 ? I don't know if we actually can. I don't know if we use confirm forms outside of destructive, highly destructive deletion things, so we might want to not deprecate it. But anyway, something to consider. Another suggestion was to create a global setting for this to dictate behavior of all destructive operations, either shut it off entirely, only allow for people with greater than this permissions. Whether you also delete sub-items or only allow deletion if all sub-items are gone, and so on. Excuse me. That would allow sites to customize the behavior for their use cases. And then a good starter use case would be to build some mock-ups around taxonomy, since vocabularies contain terms, and while you might want authors to be able to delete individual terms, you probably don't want them to be able to delete the entire vocabulary, at least unless they have a higher permission level. And then for questions, I've got, should content entity delete versus config entity delete have slightly different UX? And just a note that config entities currently return all of the related config files, which I would argue is useless for people, like normal people. They do not know what a blocka.yaml file means, like at all. Like they would recognize if it was a human readable version of the name, but I don't think that's what it currently does. So I think the answer to that question, I would argue, is no, that if you're deleting a vocabulary with a bunch of terms, you want the names of the terms that will be deleted. And if you're deleting a content type with a bunch of fields, you want the names of the fields that will be deleted. The end user doesn't know or care that one is a config entity and one is a content entity.
Do you need to write
Anyway,
show there? Config entities currently show all the related?
I didn't write this.
I did. You can fix my mistakes. I'm not going to. I always welcome that.
Is one and then I put down that Jay Rockowitz offered to take on a research task of figuring out all the various ways for the next meeting. And then I see a bunch of bullets there. So, excuse me. Anything else I missed? Otherwise, I was going to paste that as a comment in this issue here. The one with the existing mockups where we've apparently done usability review in this issue before.
All right. That's fine. I'm going to take my list of bullet point list off the bottom of this and put it into my little note doc. And I'll add that to the ticket once there's screenshots.
Okay, sweet. All right, I'm pasting the 10 seconds. So if you have any objections, speak now. And then I also added everyone who attended this meeting to the credit list. Make sure I did that. Travis, Christina, Benji, Gabor, Webchick. Thomas, your world line mine, is that right?
Yes, that is myself.
And Jay Rockowitz. Okay, I'm pressing the green button. Okay. I'm not going to remove the needs usability review tag from this issue because we still need to talk more about it, it sounds like. But I love that we, getting alignment on the issue is definitely a huge step. Getting some alignment on the solution is also a huge step. And thank you so much, Jacob, for offering to kind of take on the next steps here. That is great. Sorry, I need to sleep more than an hour a night. This is me, not you. Anyway.
Okay.
All right.
As a
Excellent.
one-time math teacher, I long ago learned not to take it personally when people fall asleep in front of me.
Yeah. Yeah, never take it personally.
Okay, thank you,
All right.
everybody.
Thanks so much.
Take care all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.